I don't care what you think of me. I don't care what you call me. I do care what you do with this information because it is important to our survival as a species.
Across America and around the world, you're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm your host, William Cooper. Tonight's guest is A. Ralph Epperson, author of The Unseen Hand, The New World Order, and producer of several videotapes on the conspiratorial view of history. Don't go away, folks. You don't want to miss one single word of tonight's episode of the Hour of the Time.
Good evening. You're listening to Liberty Under Attack Radio, your home for sourced and documented truth and help from yours truly, if you so desire.
Debt is the weapon used to conquer and enslave societies.
Good evening, welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening on the night of the very first live LUA broadcast. I would like to add first off that I was sick at the beginning of last week. Haven't quite gotten over it yet, so please bear with me if my voice is a little raspy. I'd also like to apologize in advance for the slight static in the background that you may hear. I spent all last night and this afternoon trying to diagnose the problem, but I was unsuccessful, so I do apologize in advance. First off, I'd like to direct you to my website, libertyunderattack.com, if you're not listening there already. If you're watching this archive on YouTube, Spreaker, Facebook, or any of my other social media pages, definitely take a little time to look over the information. There's a lot of good stuff there. I would also like to direct you all to my Liberty Under Attack store. There are a lot of one-of-a-kind shirts and bumper stickers, and each purchase helps contribute to the radio show. The number to call in this evening is 309-533-7857. And that number is also in the Facebook event page. We will take calls at any time, but if I may request, please wait to call until we take our first break, around 45 minutes to an hour in. If I may also make one more request. If you call in, please wait to speak until I lead you in. We already had one caller call in. Please call back about 45 minutes or an hour in. Ralph's got a lot of good stuff to say, and I'm going to give him the floor here as soon as I get done with this little introduction. So now that all that is out of the way, I would like to introduce my listeners to Ralph Epperson. Ralph's been researching for over 50 years. He's the author of many books, including The New World Order and The Unseen Hand. And he's even been a guest on the History Channel a few times. We've got a celebrity in the house, everybody. Ralph's body of work is definitely one of the best, if not the best. So Ralph, I want to thank you so very much for contributing a couple hours of your life to come on and speak with me and instill some truth and divulge some information to my viewers. I definitely appreciate it more than you know, Ralph. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. So, Ralph, welcome to LUA Interviews. Is there anything that you'd like to add to my introduction of you?
No, that's fine. I'll give you a brief couple things I want to mention about that.
Yes, sir. Go for it.
I can guarantee you no one else is saying. And we're going to talk about that tonight. I've got some things up back in the 1700s. His name was Ben Franklin. Most everybody's heard of Ben Franklin. And he wrote his autobiography. He was born in 1706 and was elected to the Pennsylvania Assembly. But in 1771, when he was in his 60s, I guess, he started writing his autobiography. And it was published in at least 1937 by P.F. Collier and Sons. In 1776, Ben Franklin was placed on a committee to draft the Declaration of Independence. Now, on page 110 of his autobiography, he talked about two things that are extremely pertinent to what I'll be discussing tonight. Ben Franklin and his friends in the assembly wanted to buy some gunpowder, but they knew the Quakers in the assembly, the majority, would not approve because they felt it would be an ingredient of a war, and we're not going to fight a war. We don't want it. We're Quakers. So they wrote up a piece of legislation for 3,000 pounds. Now, that's not pounds in weight. That's $3,000 pounds in money, to buy, quote, bread, flour, wheat, or other grain. So the assembly said, well, that sounds reasonable. Maybe we're going to feed some prisoners or maybe the guards or something. So we'll fund that. So when they got to 3,000 pounds, they bought gunpowder. And when the Quakers objected, they said, no, wait a minute. Gunpowder is another grain. And it is. Gunpowder's a grain. Notice they tricked them. They used words to deceive. Secondly, Ben Franklin and his friends in his autobiography said that we wanted to buy a great gun. I presume it was a great cannon. I don't know, but I would guess it's a cannon. And they were told they knew that it was an article of war, and so the assembly wouldn't approve it. So they proposed a bill to buy a fire engine. Ben Franklin was already in the insurance business, so they thought, well, maybe we need a fire engine to protect the Capitol, so we'll fund that. So when they got the money to do it, they bought a great gun, and the Quakers objected, and Ben Franklin said, certainly a great gun is a fire engine. Can you see? This sets the pace for what I'll be talking tonight. We have been buying bread and grain and getting gunpowder and fire, great guns. But in 1787, Ben Franklin was selected to the convention to drop the Constitution, and he's only one of 9 men who've signed both documents. Now, I want to bring to your attention a real conspiracy realist. Many people are called theorists because they don't like the thing, so they call us conspiracy theorists with wild, exotic views. I'm going to bring to you someone who knows there is a conspiracy. He told us about it. He's part of it. He's in favor of it. I'm going to bring to your attention Bill Clinton. In 1992, July the 16th, Bill Clinton spoke to the Democrat National Convention and gave his acceptance speech of the nomination. This was a live, nationally broadcast telecast. You can read this speech on pages 217 to 232 of a book entitled Putting People First, published in 1992, of course. We're going to go to page 231. Read, quote, as a teenager, Clinton said, I heard John Kennedy's summons to citizenship. And then as a student at Georgetown, I heard that call clarified by a professor I had named Carroll Quigley, end quote. Now, everybody knows who most everybody knows who John Kennedy is. Of course, he was assassinated, but he was also one of our presidents. But who on earth is this Carroll Quigley? And why would he mention it? Because he had a dramatic effect on Bill Clinton's thinking, as we're now going to discuss. I learned about Dr. Quigley and read his book, and I'll talk about the two books in a minute. I read his book way back in the 70s. So I knew it, but I did not hear that speech. But I had at least a dozen phone calls that night in 1992 for people saying, "Did you hear what Clinton just said?" And I said, "No." He said, "He talked about Quigley." I said, "You're kidding me." So I have a clip of it, plus the words are in his own book, Putting People First. Bill Clinton graduated from high school in 1964 and went to Georgetown near Washington, D.C., and that's where he met Dr. Carroll Quigley. Now notice, he was there from 64 to 68 when he graduated. But Dr. Quigley published a book called Tragedy and Hope in 1966, which was right in the middle approximately of when Bill Clinton was a four-year student. 64 to 68, the book was published in 66. One more man that he didn't mention that got him into politics was Senator William Fulbright, a Democrat senator from Arkansas. And he was Bill Clinton wanted to be president way back. One of his friends said, ever since he was in the sixth grade, Clinton said, "I want to be president." So he started working on that, and he met Senator Fulbright. So Fulbright, I believe, I can't prove this, but I believe he was the one that sent him to Georgetown to be taught by Dr. Carroll Quigley. It's that important. Now, who's Dr. Quigley? His own book says he's a professor of history at the Foreign Service School of Georgetown, and he formerly taught at Princeton and Harvard, and he got his PhD, by the way, from Harvard as well. He published his book, Tragedy and Hope. It's 1,348 pages long, and I do not suggest you buy it and read it. It's one of the most boring books you'll ever read, but there are some amazing statements in there that I want to bring to your attention. Now, I'll try and give you the page number, so if you have a copy, you can read along with me, maybe not now, but do it later, and read these quotations, because this is the book that we know for certain that Bill Clinton read and studied and took exams on, because it was required reading for Quigley's course in political science at Georgetown University. This is what Quigley wrote on page 950. Now, please pay attention, because we're going to learn what Clinton learned. Quigley wrote, quote, "There does exist and has existed for a generation is usually 40 years, an international Anglophile network." So there's existing a international Anglophile network. The word Anglophile means primarily English, but notice it's international, which operates to some extent in the way the radical right believes the Communists act. In fact, this network often I skipped a line. I'm sorry, I did, but anyway, I'll have to do it from memory. He said that they have no aversion to cooperating. Here it is. They have no aversion to cooperating with the communists. So here we got a bunch of capitalists in London and other nations working and cooperating with the communists, and that frequently does so. Now, on page 950, he continues, "I know of the operations of this network because I have studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years in the early 1960s to examine its papers and secret records." This is unprecedented. I can find no other individual who's come out like this who claims to have been made privy to the secret papers of an international Anglophile network or any other conspiracy. Now, here's the key. I have no aversion to it or to most of its aims. This conspiracy has killed multiple millions of people, and Quigley has no aversion to it. What? Okay, here it is. He says, "I have objected both in the past and recently to a few of its policies, but in general, my chief difference of opinion is that it wishes to remain unknown, and I believe its role in history is significant enough to be known." Three things that we've got to review about Carroll Quigley. He knew about this conspiracy 20 years before his book. so approximately back to 1946, right after World War II. He claims to have been allowed to review their secret papers for 2 years. And third, he supported most of their aim. That's what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is a conspiracy. Bill Clinton just told you, but I can find no evidence that any of the major media got into the background of Carroll Quigley. So Bill Clinton was telling somebody that he was a major conspirator himself, because we're going to read other quotes about what he learned from Dr. Quigley. Now, knowing that, let's now start our study of American history. And we got to go back to 1766, March the 18th, because the Parliament of Great Britain, that's their government, the body that passes laws. And they passed a law called the Declaratory Act, Declaratory. I would urge you to look it up later, maybe not now. And I think, Shane, you've got a copy of it. So if you will, we'll read from the third paragraph, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph. And you'll see, I want you to, if anywhere I misquote it, please shout out loudly to show you that I'm not making this up. You've got a copy, and I gather you got it the same place I did, off of the internet. So we're reading that, and that the King's Majesty, by and with its advice and consent of the Lords Spiritual and Temporal and Commons of Great Britain in Parliament assembled. Okay, so the assembled Parliament had, talking about the King's Majesty, had, and right ought to have full power and authority, full power and authority, full power and authority to make laws and statutes of sufficient force and validity to bind the colonies and people of America, subjects of the crown of Great Britain. And here's the key. These 4 words we're going to see 2 more times after this, so that's why this is extremely important. Subjects of the crown in all cases whatsoever. That is called absolute tyrannical power, unlimited power, despotic power. Whatever the king wanted passed, it was passed. If he wanted a law passed that we who were living in and subjects to the crown in America, he wanted us to bounce on our heads twice a day, it would be passed, because it's that full of an extension of power, unlimited power, the full power and authority to bind the people of the United States. So remember the phrase, in all cases whatsoever. Now, 11 years later, our founding fathers passed the Declaration of Independence. This is when we declared our independence. We were a nation under their control and their sovereignty, and so we're now deciding we're going to be on our own. We're going to declare our independence from England, July the 4th, 1776. The second paragraph, down to the bottom. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations. Now, the word usurpations are violations of sovereignty. A free man is his own government. He's sovereign. But here we see that King George was repeatedly usurping our sovereignty, which means I'm going to be your master, not you. Okay, now, then he goes on. All having direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny. Now let's stop here and define the word tyranny. One of the ways you can get a definition that was consistent with the Founding Fathers was in the first dictionary. I think it was the first English dictionary in 1828, which is about 50 years later. It defines the word tyranny as total power in the hands of government, any government, total, unlimited. But notice this, our Founding Fathers said tyranny is absolute power, but they said it's an absolute power. They're implying this is big stuff. And they lived with it for 10 years. And they said it's time to declare our independence. Let's read on. He has suspended our own legislatures, this is a couple of paragraphs later, and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. So now 11 years later, we've now declared our independence. By the way, this is the reason we declared our independence. We were taught when I was in school that we declared our independence because of taxation without representation. In my book, The Unseen Hand, I wrote in 1985, I researched it and found out that it was estimated that the gross tax that the king was collecting from the citizens of the United States was 1% of the gross domestic product. 1%. And we were rebelling against 1% tax. We're paying about 50% tax today, and we're not rebelling. So that's not the reason. This is the reason. The violation of our sovereignty and the creation of a government that has the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. Now, our founding fathers reacted to this single grant of power to the king by creating a three-branch government, the legislative, executive, and judicial. And each one has what they call a check and balance. So they can, if the one branch of the government speaks out of turn or takes on too much power, the other one or the other two can either individually or together can put a stop to it. In other words, we're not going to tolerate total power. We divided the power. But hold on, we're not going to divide the power. Please bear with me. As I said, you're on a jury. Keep listening. We're not through yet. Now we're going to read from Article 1, Section 8 of the legislative branch of power. This is where they gave Congress the power to operate. And here's what they read. Article 1, Section 8. Now, they're not called clauses, and many copies of the Constitution do not number these, but I number them just to make it easier to find them. So let's call it Article 1, Section 8, and then we're reading down to the 17th. But let's read the first of them very briefly. What powers did we, the people, give Congress? The power to lay taxes, borrow money, regulate commerce, establish naturalization, coin money, punish counterfeiting, establish post offices, declare war, raise an army, provide a navy, and then the 17th one, so it's called Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Congress shall have the power to exercise exclusive legislation, exclusive in all cases whatsoever. Huh? Wait a minute. Wait, Ralph, you're repeating yourself, Ralph. Yes, I am, because our founding fathers did. We read the Declaratory Act in 1766. We lived under it for 10 years, declared our independence because of the Declaratory Act, and now we're going to live under it. We're going to give Congress the very power we rejected, the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. Let me read it again. The power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever. I think I missed a step. I guess I did. Hold on a second. I missed the step where they used the words in the declaration. Hold on. I thought it was in my notes here, but it's not. Here we go. I'm going to read it further. We got to go back to the Declaration of Independence because I missed the second step. Okay, here we go. Yeah, here it is. Maybe Shane, I don't think I read this, but if I did, stop me. But I don't think I did. This is now they listed. After that sentence where they determined that the king was violating our sovereignty, it says all having the direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the states. Then it says to prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And we're going to read down to the 22nd one of those. It says they were guilty of suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. Obviously, they knew about the Declaratory Act. That was the reason we declared our independence, and they just spelled it out for us. They didn't say it came from the Declaratory Act, and for 30 or 40 years, I never found it until maybe a couple of years ago. I found the step 1. This is step number 2, and we're going to go to step number 3. So step number 2, after 10 years after this abomination was passed by Parliament, our founding fathers said, this is the reason we're declaring our independence, because King George was dissolving our legislatures and creating theirs, with the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. The very same words of the Declaratory Act. Now we can talk about the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. We gave Congress only 18 delegated powers. 18, not 417 or 47,000 or whatever they jolly well want to do. Only 18. The power to raise an army, provide for a navy, punish counterfeiting. That's it. That's it. And we'll get into a little bit more of that in a few more minutes. So now we're going to say King George was guilty of exercising exclusive legislation. Oh, sorry. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. We gave Congress the power to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever. So let's just summarize. Declaratory Act gave Parliament the power, gave King George the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. Our founding fathers, 10 years later, said that's the power of absolute tyranny, and we're aware of it, and we're declaring our independence because of it. We're not going to live under that grant of power. So now, 11 years later, they're creating the legislative branch of government with the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. And I'm still demanding anybody to give me an explanation. Why did they do that? What are these people insane? Why would they do that? They just gave Congress the very same power they objected to. The power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. They used the same words. Why? Now, that opens up the next step, which is the conspiracy that Bill Clinton told us about. They've got the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever. Now, I want to continue. We're not finished yet in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. So they got that power over such district, not exceeding 10 miles square, as may become the seat of government of the United States. Now, wait a minute. Wait. Something's wrong here. When we declared in the Declaration, we were creating a nation called America. Well, who was doing it? The states of America. 13 states were there was no federal government at the time, so they united to join together to form a federal government. And they gave that power that federal government, only 18 legislative powers. Now, when they did that, and you can read this in the Declaration, the word states is capitalized because in English, when you talk about specific states, you capitalize the S. So it's the states of America. The word united is not capitalized. Now, I don't remember whether it's an adjective or an adverb or something, but it means that those states, those 13 states with the capital S, were united to form the nation called America. But here we've got a creation of a government called the seat of the government of the United States. Now, where does the United States function? Only in Washington, D.C. And that's going to become very important later on in our life. So if you lived in Washington, D.C., you were a citizen of the United States. If you lived in Georgia, you were a citizen of Georgia. If you moved to Alabama, you were a citizen of Alabama. So now we've got a second government called the United States, and we're now going to see how that government functions later on. Now, the next thing I want to get into is Obamacare, because it's going to illustrate exactly a very important lesson we're going to learn a little later. Congress passed a law creating a Obamacare. Now, therefore, Congress did this. They'd have to go back to Article 1, Section 8, and read of the delegated powers to create a federal government health insurance program. And as I said, I just read briefly through there, and I would invite you at your own convenience to go back to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, and see if you can find the delegated power to create a national health care program. It's not listed. Therefore, they don't have the power because they've only got 18 powers. But they do have the power because Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 gave Congress absolute power. And our Congress and our president know that. They know that, but you and I don't know that, and we're not being taught that. I want to ask you to do yourself a little favor. The next time your congressman comes to, or even your senator comes to the United States, comes to visit your town in an open forum, please stand up. And by the way, here's a little tip for you: stand in the back of the room. So when you shout, you have to shout out your question. Hey, Congressman. Yes, way in the back. Yes. What's your question? Mr. Congressman, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution grants you, as a congressman, 18 specific powers. How many of those can you name? And wait for an answer. And I'm telling you, they don't know what you're talking. I can't say about everyone, but I can almost guarantee you they don't know what you're talking about, because they know they've got the unlimited power to do whatever they jolly well want, including passing an Obamacare. Now, the reason they did this, of course, is because the private insurance industry is they're a bunch of crooks. Now, I've got to get my here. Hold on. I'm going to show you a little bit about that to show you that they turned it over to an agency that is certainly not wasteful and inefficient. Now, I've got in front of me about 15 articles. I know it's going to take a little time, and this is boring, but it's going to prove a very important point. Please listen to this. These are articles that I've read in my local newspaper. This is not something I made up. I'm going to only give you the headline and maybe a comment, one sentence comment, and then give the year the article was written. I'm going to start in 1999. Pygmy owls to cost economy $425 million apiece. We wanted to save the pygmy owl, and we did. Each one cost us $425 million. Fraudulent Katrina aid, 2006, may total $1 billion. U.S.-led rebuilding, 2008, of Iraq, $117 billion failure. The next article, U.S. rural airfare subsidies about to soar higher, up to $175 million. We're funding a small airline that flies between point A and B, and they get 1 or 2 passengers, but they need to get paid for 6 or 7, so we fund that to $175 million. $47 billion in 2009 in bogus Medicare claims. 2010, inmates sought tax refunds of $130 million. 2011, brand name drugs cost Medicaid $329 million extra. 2011, IRS paid more than $500 million in undeserved home buyer credits. Here in Tucson, the Ghost Ranch Lodge was built in the 30s when people would drive through Tucson on a highway, and there were motels popped up on either side of the city. This was on the north side, and those motels were a little bit better. But the Ghost Ranch Lodge, when they built the interstate, it stopped operating. So they shut it down, and someone else bought it, and they were going to convert the 112 units to low-cost housing. So now the project cost $25 million, and if you divide that by 112, each unit cost around $215,000. Now, motel rooms are very small, maybe 30 by 30 or 20 by 30. So you get a 20 by 30 house for $215,000 each. A 4-bedroom in Tucson costs around $215,000. Okay, 2011, return aid, FEMA tells disaster victims, $22 million. 2011, waste and fraud in 2 war zones has cost U.S. up to $60 billion. Here's an article, Postal Service girds for historic default. Their health benefits are $11 billion in arrears. They don't have the money, $11 billion, but you and I do have the money to bail them out. 2012, IRS gave out $5 billion in refunds to identity thieves. Here's another post office. Their budget was $16 billion short for fiscal 2012. And they're operating at a loss. A major corporation does that, they're bankrupt, not the post office. 2013, use of food stamps swells even as the economy improves. 47 million, $74 billion a year. Okay. 2013, we're almost finished. Fast food pay puts $7 billion cost onto the taxpayers. 2013, IRS refunded $4 billion to identity thieves. That was in 2013. 2013, Post Office reports loss of $5 billion the last year. Here's something, and I was watching our cable television. There's a TV station in Atlanta, Channel 2, said the State Department rebuilt mosques in Cairo for $770 million. Now, we separate church and state, and we can't give money to mosques, but we can in Cairo. That doesn't apply over there. We'll rebuild mosques for those people. 2014, Social Security spent $288 million on flawed computer system. 2014, IRS paid at least $6 billion in bogus child tax credits in 2013. Now, one last comment, just as a general statement. This article was just June of last year. Our city government wants to we have a dry river flowing through our city. They want to start pumping water into it, and they got to get 404 permits to do that. And the man's in charge in Tucson says, you bring in the federal government and things move at glacial speed. Yes, Obamacare is moving at glacial speed, and that's all costing us money. So in other words, they turned over this fraudulent private insurance industry to someone who's far more efficient. And the U.S. government is very efficient at wasting money. Why would they ask the federal government to do that with that kind of record? Why? Well, that's okay, because America is a wealthy nation. Do you understand? Now, we've just turned over 1/8 of the gross domestic product to the federal government. 1/8. That's one out of every $8 spent in this nation is now in the hands of the federal government. 2013, an article a couple of years ago now, a year and a half ago, November 2000, well, a year ago. Here's an article, a couple, this was written by the Associated Press in my morning paper. A couple, I'm going to round to the nearest $100. The couple were paying $800 a month for their medical insurance. So the deductible was $2,500, but they were canceled. Their regular policy in the private insurance business was canceled. So they went looking at the Obamacare, and the cheapest one they could find was $1,300 a year. Huh? Wait a minute. They just asked paying $800 in an inefficient program, but they have to pay $1,300 in a efficient program. But the deductible went from $2,500, which means they pay the first $2,500. Anything above that's covered by the insurance. But under the Obamacare, their deductible is $13,000. Oh, that's right. Barack Obama told us about a dozen times that if you like your insurance company, you can keep it. If you don't want to keep your doctor, you can keep it. And every average American householder will save $2,500. That doesn't sound like it to me. Just a couple of days ago, Rick Harrison on the Pawn Stars program on cable news, the Fox News reported, they interviewed him on their morning show, and he said that their medical insurance went from $19,000 a month, and he must have, 20 or 30 employees, to $30,000, $19,000 to $30,000 a month. And that's savings. That's a savings of $2,500, except my calculator doesn't come up with that answer. Now, another program that's very inefficient is food stamps. But there's something about this. There is a built-in a built-in edge, end. There, I mean, we can only go so far. But let's talk about that to show you why do we have food stamps? If it's such a great idea, why can't we all get food stamps? Hey, that's a great idea. Gee, wouldn't have to pay for my food. I just get some food stamps, go to the grocery store. Obama raised the number of food stamps people from 17 million to 45 million in the first 4 years of his office. Now, ask yourself this question. If Barack Obama raised your food stamps, or gave them to you for the first time ever, and boy, that was a nice thing to do. Thank you, Obama. And the guy that Obama's running and says, wait a minute, we can't afford this. We got to stop it. Who are you going to vote for between Obama and candidate B? Which one? Who are you going to vote for? Oh, the guy that's going to cut him? I don't think so. In other words, someone's got to pay for those who get the free food stamps. And guess who? Those people that voted for candidate B. Why is that right? I didn't vote for what's his name, the Republican. I voted independent, but let's just say I did. So my money, I voted for him because I knew he was going to cut food stamps, and everybody voted for Obama, and I lost, but I'm going to pay for it. Oh, wait a minute. Now, there's a reason that we all can't go on food stamps, which is very significant. Let's talk about that. Let's define the word stealing. Stealing is defined as the taking of property without permission. In other words, I'll give you a little example. I have a lawnmower in my backyard. It cut my grass, and it's a brand new one. Boy, it does everything. Mulch those weeds, chops them down, cuts down small trees, and mulches it for me. Puts it in a nice little stack, and I can ride it. An incredible. No, not all the way, but anyway, I've got a lawnmower. So I go out there to use it this summer, and I notice it's gone. I said, wait a minute, it's gone. I said, well, I think that size, you got to get it down. It's got to be someone local. So I walked in the alleys. We have alleys in Tucson where you walk behind the house where the garbage trucks come. And I noticed over the fence that there's my lawnmower sitting in my neighbor down about 5 houses. And I said, wait a minute, that's not right. So I called the police. And I say, police, my lawnmower's been stolen, and I know where it is. So please come out. Police comes out, where is it? I said, first of all, can you prove it's yours? And I said, yes, I've got the bill of sale. The serial number's listed. In fact, I even scratched my name on the gas tank to make sure it's my lawnmower. So even if it's similar, it's not mine because it doesn't have a scratch. So the policeman and I go down to the end of the block, and the policeman says, I understand you got a lawnmower. Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's back there in the backyard, cuts everything, mulches. Do you have a title of ownership? No, I must have discarded it. And he said, well, this guy Epperson says you stole it. Oh, no, I didn't. And then he says, let's go back in the backyard. And Epperson comes out with his receipt and his scratches. And sure enough, it's my lawnmower. It's been stolen. Who goes to jail? Me or the guy that stole my lawnmower? The guy that stole the lawnmower. It's called stealing. Now, I go back to my house. A couple hours later, the doorbell rings. And I say, okay, hello. Who are you? I said, listen, I'm collecting for the poor in Tucson. It's a very charitable organization. There's a need for the homeless. So please donate if you can. I'm with an agency that collects money for the poor. Okay. So I look at my wallet and I say, okay, I got $20. That's all I can afford right now, but I'll give you $20 and I commend you for your service. So the man pulls a gun and says, Mr. Epperson, we believe since you've got a nice car in your carport and we know how much your home costs, I believe you can afford more. Go look for more money. And so I go to the back bedroom and I find another $20 bill and I give it to him. So now he's got $40 and he walks away. And I call the police. And I say, police, I've just been robbed of $40. He says, well, tell me where. The policeman comes out, tells me what. And I said, I look down the street and he's about 5 doors down the street. And I said, that's the guy. So we run down to the street and the policeman says to him, this guy here, Epperson, says you stole $40. Oh, no, I didn't steal money from him. Well, you got the money and he didn't give it. He didn't give it to you voluntarily. You took it from him. Well, yes. He said, well, who are you? Well, I work for the Internal Revenue Service. Well, wait a minute. And we determined that Epperson's got a nice house and a nice car. We can afford $40. And so we had him pay his fair share. Is that called stealing? Yes or no? Of course it is. Stealing is defined as the taking of property without permission. I didn't give permission to take $40 for the homeless in Tucson. I've donated what I could. I did my share. Now, which one of us goes to jail in the second instance? Me or the IRS agent? And I think you guys better come visit me because I'll be in jail. Huh? Can you see what the problem is? We have legalized stealing in this country. Now, why can't we all go on food stamps? What a great idea. And the answer is, who's going to produce the money to pay for the food and the food itself? If everybody's on food stamps, that means they're not growing anything or producing anything. They're just waiting to go to the grocery store with these pieces of paper to buy the food that someone else has produced. Here's a little lesson for you, and I think this will make great sense. The food stamp program is administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They proudly report that they distribute free meals and food stamps to 47 million people on an annual basis. So our government, the Department of Agriculture, hands it out. Meanwhile, the National Park Service, run by the U.S. Department of Interior, asks us, quote, please do not feed the animals, end quote. Their stated reason for that policy is this, quote, the animals will grow dependent on the handouts and then they will never learn to take care of themselves, huh? Is there a conclusion we can draw from that? Now, please understand, I pity the homeless, and we're going to tell you why there are a lot of homeless today later on. Now, we've got to go to find out why government believes it has the power and where that idea comes from to take from one person to give to another by IRS agents who collect it. And I'm going to read from the book called Capital and Other Writings of Karl Marx. Karl Marx was the father of communism in 1848. He wrote the Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, and this book was called Capital, which is one book, and then other writings of his. And I'm going to read from one of the pages the very essence of the Marxist communist philosophy. From each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. Government exists to take from those who have the ability to give to those who have the need. There's no question. Government's going to do this. They're going to send IR agents out with a gun and get $40 from everybody whether they can afford it or not. That's called communism. In America, we have charity. There, you might remember, I don't know if it's still going on, but Memorial Day, Jerry Lewis had a telethon, and he was raising money voluntarily. People would call in and make a pledge to give money voluntarily. They looked in their wallet and said, boy, that's a great service function agency. I'd like to help them, so I'll send them money. Some people would donate $10 and some would donate thousands. That's voluntary. But some people under the tax system pay $10 or $20, and some pay thousands, if not more. From each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. Now, I want to read another similar quote from another man who said this. I think you'll see, said the same thing. And then I'm going to ask you, who said this? Which communist said this? See whether or not you agree that this sentence agrees with the sentence I just read. We are going to try to take all of the money that we think is unnecessarily being spent and take it from the haves and give it to the have-nots that need it so much. End of quote. So we in government are going to take from those who have who are called the haves, and we're going to give it to the have-nots that need it. What's the difference? None. Marx says we're going to take it from the abilities, from those who have the abilities, and give to those who have the needs. And this guy says we're going to take it from the haves and give to the have-nots through government. That's what Marx said. There's no difference. Identical except different words. Government will disperse money taken by force to give to the poor. That's called stealing. No, it's not. Government, that was said by Lyndon Johnson, president, who replaced John Kennedy in 1964. And that's exactly what food stamps is. We're taking the money from the haves to give to the have-nots who need it so much. Now, I'm going to now prove to you that there is a limit to this, and other nations who have tried communism have discovered it doesn't work. I'm going to read from the Constitution of the USSR. Now, that was Soviet Russia that was disbanded apparently when they knocked the Iron Curtain down. There were something like 11 or 12 different nations all united into the USSR. And this is Article 12 of their Constitution. Work is a duty for each able-bodied citizen in accordance with the principle, he who does not work, neither shall he eat. Huh? If you don't work, you don't eat? Well, they did say at least able-bodied citizens. So in other words, if you're able-bodied, you better work, because if you're not, we're going to force you to work. Okay, that means we're going to make you slave. You can ask yourself, how much more? Well, that's another question. We'll cover that later. But let's go on with Article 12. The principle applied in communist Russia is that of socialism, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. There's nothing in there about being able-bodied, is it? From each according to his ability. If you're able-bodied, they determine you're able to have the ability, whether you're working or not, they're going to take from you and give it to the person with need. So in other words, it does work. That's communism. The Fidel Castro imposed Marxist communism on Cuba in about I think it was 59 or so. And just a matter of 2 years ago, after some 50 years of being a communist, he's admitted communism doesn't work. Huh? Wait a minute. Obama wants to make it work by taking from one to give to another, and yet the communists find out it doesn't work. Okay, now let's talk about recession. We're in a recession. A recession is not as severe as a depression. And someone jokingly said that a recession is when your neighbor loses his job, and a depression is when you lose your job. So we're only in a recession. If you got a job, it's a recession. If you lost your job, it's a depression. So I want to talk about this recession we've been in since George Bush, and then Barack Obama's allowed it to continue. Let's go back and let's find out where it came from and why it's still going on. I'm going to read from a New York Times newspaper of 1999. That was the last year of Bill Clinton's being in the presidency. So this article was written September 30th and published by the New York Times. Let me tell you this. The New York Times is the unofficial voice. When the New York Times speaks, it's speaking for the administration in almost every case. So in other words, when you want to know what the government's thinking, you read the New York Times. But they're telling us something. They had an editorial, and this is what it said. First of all, let me just say this. No banker in his right mind would make a loan to someone who cannot pay him back, or a lot of people who cannot pay it back, because when you don't get the money back, the bank goes bankrupt. They only have the money that's been deposited. If the money is taken away from the deposits, then the bank goes bankrupt. So no banker would do that. But Bill Clinton, according to the New York Times, urged them to change that and start making loans to less qualified homeowners or people wanting a home. The article, this pilot program will encourage those banks to extend home mortgages to individuals whose credit is generally not good enough to qualify for conventional loans. So Fannie Mae, which is going to do this by urging the banks, has been under increasing pressure from the Clinton administration to expand mortgage loans among low and moderate income people. Wait a minute, Bill. Just between you and me, don't you know that a bank can't make loans they can't get paid back? Come on. No banker would do that. Oh, yes. The article went on to say, if they fail, the government will step up and bail them out. So they did. They allowed Fannie Mae to buy bad mortgages that were loaned by the bank. So the bank got its money back. They were bailed out. And the article told us that in 1999. Now, George Bush W. allowed it to continue for 8 years, and Barack Obama took over. And then he said, I'm going to solve this recession, and I'll do it, and he hasn't done it yet. The economy is still in trouble, and nothing seems to get better. The average income of a homeowner in America is down by 3,000 people. 50 million people are out of work. They're not working anymore. And yet, that means they wanted it to continue. Now, Shane, you talked about an hour break. You want to take it now? Shane, are you there? Well, I didn't hear. I heard someone hit something. So, Shane, if you want to take your break, take it now. If not, I'll continue. There's some music. We'll be right back.
Yep, we're going now. Yes, sir, I am.
To be a patriot, ladies and gentlemen, is not to be loyal to my country, right or wrong. Do you understand what I'm saying? To be a patriot is to be loyal to the principles and ideals and to the supreme law of the land which makes the country. And if there's someone in the government, in the country, who is doing wrong things in the name of the country, you cannot support it. You cannot support it. The nation is not geographical boundaries. It is an idea.
Too many suffering, too many tears. To see how you die, I'm knowing for years. When we look around, nobody care, and the people them are living in fear. The system needs to change right now. Too much youth are good on me, not grave right now. You know, see the bigger it's a deal right now. After get the people, I must behave right now. Oh, the system needs to change right now. Too much youth are good on me, not grave right now. You know, see the bigger it's a deal right now. After get the people, I must behave right now.
This is something that I realized many years ago has nothing to do with geographical boundaries. It has nothing to do with the border between the United States and Mexico. It has to do with the way we think. It has to do with the principles and ideals which we support and believe in that made this the greatest, freest, most opportune nation upon the face of this earth. It is the reason why we were successful and the Mexicans were not. Why we were successful and the Canadians were not.
Me can't believe I saw them cheat people. And they have to protect and them a beat people. I'm in no system for the street people. Can't believe them a delete people. The system needs to change right now. Too much youth are good on me, not grave right now. You know, see the bigger it's a deal right now. After get the people, I must behave right now. Oh, the system needs to change right now. Too much youth are good on me, not grave right now. You know, see the bigger it's a deal right now. After get the people, I must behave right now. Yeah.
It's the reason why out of all of the peoples of the world, this nation is the hardest to conquer and bring into a one-world government. Why this nation is the most difficult to disarm. It has to do with freedom. It has to do with the understanding of what freedom really is. It has to do with the knowledge that if you are not willing to die for freedom, you cannot and will not ever be free, because all your enemy must do is threaten your life and you will whip into a bowl of quivering jelly.
Me can't believe I saw them cheat people. And they have to protect and them a beat people. I'm in no system for the street people. Can't believe them a delete people. The system needs to change right now. Too much youth are good on me, not grave right now. You know, see the bigger it's a deal right now. After get the people, I must behave right now. Oh, the system needs to change right now. Too much youth are good on me, not grave right now. You know, see the bigger it's a deal right now. After get the people, I must behave right now. Yeah.
That's what it's about. It's about the difference between right and wrong. It's about whether you have been intimidated and scared to death by tyrants, which makes you pay tribute to your masters, or whether you will be
Shane,
free
if
and
you're
stand on your
hearing, I
own two
cannot
feet
hear
and
you.
say, no, not
no-
now,
there's no
not
sound
ever,
at all.
not ever will I do such a thing. And be willing to die for that stance. Because unless you're willing to take it, you are already enslaved, and there is no
Shane, did
rescue,
you,
there is no
disconnect it?
hope, there is no
There's
help,
no
not
sound.
now, not ever.
Oh, I heard something very faint.
Like, is my mic not working?
Shane, are you there? Shane, this is Ralph Epperson. Are you still there? There's no sound, Shane. For those who are listening, I just want you to know I
Okay,
cannot
can
hear
you hear
anything
me?
either. So just
Can
be
you hear me?
patient. Shane's trying to get it figured
Okay,
out.
can you hear
Maybe
me,
I'm
sir?
on the air and he's not.
Are you there, Ralph?
I don't know. There he is. Some faint, very faint, Shane.
Yep,
Hold
I'm
on.
here, trying to figure this out.
Keep trying. Anyway,
Can you hear me?
little technical problem. For some reason, there's no sound.
Hey, can you hear
Shane,
me?
I don't know what it is. I've still got you on Skype. You're there. I know that I'm able to speak, but I don't know that it's going over the air. But if it is, I just want to keep speaking to let the listening audience know
Hey,
that
Ralph.
we're here.
am I-
We're just trying to get a
am I
technical
here?
problem solved. I promise you, listening audience,
I
if you
am
can't
here.
hear me, I will. I will not break into song.
All right, can...
Certain that he got back on the air to put a stop to that. Oh well. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, still nothing from Shane. I don't know what happened. I probably shouldn't be talking, but it's just a way that if I am,
here?
you can hear me. I want you to know we're here. We just got a technical problem. We got another hour to go apparently, but for some reason it's there's a technical problem and we can't hear Shane. Oh, he's up. Hold on. I got a message on my Shane board. Hold on. I don't know how to get there. Hold on. What do I do to get there? Well, anyway, I don't know how to read it. If you sent me a message, I don't know how to read it.
All right, can you hear me?
There, yes, finally, Shane, there you are. Well, I heard you then, and then it ended. No more. You were on for a second, but not anymore. Shane, are you still there?
All right, am I here?
Yes, you're there. A little bit less than it was, sound-wise, but we can hear you. But now suddenly there's nothing.
So it's intermediate. It comes on and stops, and then
Okay, let's try this.
I hear you
Can
again,
me,
but
Ralph?
very, very, very faint. I don't know what the problem is, Shane. I'm just talking in case I'm on the air to let
All right.
people know that we're trying.
Am I here?
Yes, there you are. Now, speak.
Good?
Yeah, it's a little bit.
Okay.
It's a little bit muted,
All right,
but
I think I'm
fine.
back.
Yeah, okay.
I think I'm back.
Shane, well, now it's soft again. I'm sorry, people, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay,
This is
I'm
just
here.
a technical problem.
Okay.
You heard Shane say this is the first time he's been on a live broadcast.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. I'm not sure what happened.
Okay, but you're still very weak. We got to get you louder.
Okay, I am not sure what happened, but
Okay, I heard the word "but" and nothing since. There you go. Shane, are you there? Keep talking.
okay. Is it? Am I here?
Yes, you're there. And it's loud now.
Okay.
Shane, I'm
Okay,
sorry, but okay. I want you to know we're hearing
Are
you.
we good now?
Yes, there. That's perfect.
Yep, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. You
Okay,
did
I'm
that
there now?
because you were
Okay.
afraid I was going to start singing, weren't
Okay,
you?
sorry about that, guys. I'm not sure what happened. Like I said, this is the first time I've been live.
Okay. Anyway,
I am-
did you hear me at all
Okay,
during that
good
time?
deal. Good deal.
Shane, were
Okay,
you able
all
to
right.
hear me?
So, I am back. I apologize for that. No, I'm just still trying to figure all this out. So, guys, I do apologize. It'll get better.
Okay, Shane, can you hear me now?
Yep, I heard you. I could hear you. I sent you a message that said I'm here, just not sure what's going on, and they can hear you. So
Okay, they can hear me. Okay,
you
well,
are good.
anyway,
I think we're back. So let's get into the second hour here. Ralph, the floor is all yours. And actually, I do want to say one thing. People can now call in. Okay.
Okay.
The call-in number for the show is 309-533-7857. Again, 309-533-7857. Call in. We'd love to hear from you.
May I suggest to you,
Okay,
Shane,
it's
that
all yours, Ralph.
yeah, may I suggest that if you take a caller and he starts wandering off of subject, please tell him that he's more than anxious. We're more than willing to let him question me or comment about what I'm saying. But if he's got his own agenda, have him call another day. Please, let's stick to the subject, because some of the things I've got to say are still revolutionary that we've got to say. So I would like very much to do the best I can to get as much of this covered as possible. So unless the caller's got something to add specifically, I would urge you, let's just cover it. And if we run out of time with what I'm saying, then take a call. That's up to you. It's your program. Anyway, let's talk about a depression of 1920.
Go for it, Ralph.
Everyone knows about the crash of 29. Boy, that was big. This nation was in serious trouble from 29 to 39. That's called a depression, baby. Yes, there was an equal one in 1920. 1920. Now, when I was in college, in business classes, we learned about the 1929 depression. Oh, that was a mess, boy. But we talked about all the people selling stock. It was staggering. And there were people going bankrupt and losing their houses and cars and their second children. And so but strangely enough, we never talked about who was buying all that stock. For every share of stock that was sold in that crash, somebody was buying it, and we never talked about who was buying it. Well, tonight we're going to answer that question. I'm going to tell you who was buying it. Let's go back, first of all, to 1920. I want to read just briefly from an Intercollegiate Review, a magazine, fall 2009. It says it's a journal of scholarship and opinion, and this is a brilliant article. Now, let's go back to 1920. Unemployment in 1920 had jumped from 4% to 12%. Barack Obama's got 8 or 9%, so this was another third or fourth more, up to as much as a half. 12% unemployment, and the gross national product declined by 17%. Warren G. Harding was elected in November 1920, and during his speech when he was inaugurated in March of 21, he said he was going to cut the budget nearly in half for the fiscal 1921 to 22. Did Barack Obama cut the budget yet? No. He was going to slash tax rates for all income groups. Has Barack Obama done that? No. The national debt was reduced by 1/3. Barack Obama's increased it by more than all of the previous presidents combined. By late summer, August or September of 21, which is only 6 or 8 months later, 5 months later, signs of recovery were already visible. The unemployment went from 12% to 6%. In less than a year, he cut unemployment by half. Has Barack Obama done that? No. And at the end of 22, it was 2.4%. What? Down to almost no unemployment in less than 2 years, in less than a year, really. Has Barack Obama done that? Did George Bush do any of that? No, none of them have done that. Do you understand? They know about the crash of depression of 20 and what happened to Warren G. Harding. He died very mysteriously only 3 years after office, after he was inaugurated. And I'm still trying to find out how. But I have a suspicion the bankers who run this show didn't like that. Do you understand? You can solve a depression in less than a year by cutting the unemployment to half and then down to 2% in a year and a half or so, and it's over. But Barack Obama's kept it alive to 8 or 9% for 6 years now. Why? Why? Okay. Let me tell you very briefly. Well, let's hold that in abeyance. The 29 crash till later. Okay, now let's deal with the United States and the United States of America. The Constitution of the United States was created by 13 states, and of course now there's 50. And then we've got the Washington, D.C., which is a separate area of 10 miles square in Maryland and I think Virginia. They ceded the land to them at no cost, I believe, to the federal government. So we got the United States of America, which is really America, meaning the 50 states, and we've got the United States in Washington, D.C., two governments. Now, the people that live in Washington, D.C. don't have a vote in Congress, but they pay federal income taxes. Is that called taxation without representation? The last time I looked up a dictionary, I think that's true. Taxation without representation means you ain't got no vote, but pay your taxes, baby. That's called taxation without representation. And our founding fathers gave that to the citizens living in Washington, D.C. Their affairs are run by Congress. Remember, there are three branches of government: the legislative, executive, and judicial. Now, let's talk about Social Security. When I was a senior in high school, we had a lady come. We had a class called civics in my senior year sometime, I don't know, semester, I think maybe two, and we learned all about government and everything else. The lady from the Social Security Administration walked in and said, "Hey, kids, you're all going to graduate here a few more months. You're going to go out and get your first job. And when you do, your boss is going to ask you for a Social Security number. So you better come in and get one before you get there. And before you go, so you have a number, and you can do that. And you can walk in and get it." Now, there was nothing about it was mandatory or there's a law. It's just you got to get one. So she's told us to go down and get one. So we all bundled ourselves down there and got a Social Security card. But I'm going to tell you, it's voluntary. Oh, now wait a minute, Ralph. Everybody knows you don't get. It's not voluntary. You got to have a card because you can't get a job without it. Wrong. Let me tell you this. I'm going to read two letters that I have in my file, and by the way, on my DVD called America's Secret Destiny, I show you the letter. I didn't make it up. It's not typeset by me. It's official. In fact, the second one was actually notarized by a notary public. This is written by a district manager for the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, the Social Security Administration, where it was in this year. The Social Security Administration does not require that you have a Social Security number. What? It's not required? No. Well, I got it in writing. Oh, but everybody knows that. No, we don't know that. Why? Okay, second letter. This was written by a, claims representative for the Department of Health and Human Services, Social Security Administration. Social Security is a voluntary system in that no one is required to get a number. Oh, now wait a minute. Come on, Ralph. You typed that yourself. No, that's the second letter that I didn't type and no one else typed. They were typed by the government, admitting it's voluntary. And let me tell you why it's voluntary. Now, who must pay income tax? Oh, yeah, it says here, who must pay tax? I used to file on a 1040 ES. I don't have a salary because I work for myself. I'm self-employed. I have my own business. So I have my own business. I said, I don't have to pay. I'll file quarterly, and then at the end of the year, I'll total that up and pay you whatever I owe you over and above that. So I have a copy of that 1040 ES form. It says, who must pay the tax? The estimated tax rules apply to U.S. citizens. Wait a minute. It just said that if you live in Washington, D.C., you're a U.S. citizen. But if you live in America, you're a citizen of the state of Georgia or Alabama or Arizona. So if you don't live in Washington, D.C., you don't have to pay taxes because it's voluntary. And I'm going to tell you why it's voluntary. Now let's talk about a right and a privilege, which is the next step of this thing. What is the difference between a right and a privilege? A right is defined as the ability to act morally without asking permission. Now, I want to read from the Declaration of Independence. We, the people of the United States, do ordain this declaration, etc. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of wait a minute, it said that we have unalienable rights. What is an unalienable right? It means that no government can take it away. We admitted we got our rights, all of us, from God, our Creator. So our Creator said, I'm going to give you rights, and no one else can take them away. They're yours, and they're yours. You can give them away if you wish, but no one can take them away. No government, no majority, no minority, no oligarchy, no Republicans will define in a minute, no individual, no group of individuals, no gang, no one. Now, of course, they can do that, but they don't have the right to. And if they take away our rights, they get punished. That's the way it used to be. So the right is defined as the ability to act morally without asking permission. I want to go to church on Sunday. I have to go down and get a license from the government. No, I have the right. I want to get married. Well, I do have to get a license, but at least it's my decision. No one can force me into a marriage contract. Well, let's see. I want to drive on the road. Well, I have to have. Okay, so those are privileges. Marriage has now become a privilege. You can't get married without a license from the government. So privileges, permission to act morally, must be granted by the government. Here, my neighbor around the corner from me teaches people who open up a restaurant, they got to get a license. So permission to act morally must be granted by the government. If they don't want you to open up the restaurant, you can't open up the restaurant, which means it's a privilege. Now, let's talk about that. I'm going to show you that there's a very important difference between the word liberty and the word freedom as well, between right and privilege. Privileges are granted by government, which means they can be taken away by government. Liberty is defined as each man is free to decide for himself what is right and wrong. Freedom is defined as the unalienable right to act morally. Let me try to explain what that means. I can live my life as long as I don't interfere with the right of someone else. And that right is only defined as if I harm them personally or their property. If I speak out opposed to some bill, I have the unalienable right to do that, even though it harms the guy who wants the bill to be passed. We just saw in France where 22 people were shot dead by some terrorists who were printing a magazine. That's the unalienable right to freedom of press. But notice the terrorists took it away and killed them. So, and the people in France are demonstrating with a sign on their forehead says, I am, and then they name the name of this magazine, which means I'm Charlie. I'm the guy that does it. I've got the right to publish as well. So now I want you to know there are actually people who want total liberty, which is unrestricted freedom. I'm going to read from a little booklet called The Book of the Law, written by Aleister Crowley, I think back in about the 30s or so. I don't even think the book says when it was published. 1938. Now we're going to read, I'm going to skip from various pages, reading just one or two sentences at a time. The book lays down a simple code of conduct. Quote, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. End quote. What? Whatever I want, I can do? If I want to rape somebody, I can? If I want to murder somebody, I can? If I want to steal from somebody, I can. If I want to break into their house, I can. If I want to steal their goods or kidnap their daughter, I can. Yes. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. There's no government under a concept of that. In fact, he went on just a couple of sentences later, all events are equally lawful. All events. Just like the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever is all inclusive. All events are equally lawful. Now we're going to go to page 19. Just bear with me while I'm flipping pages here. This book was revealed by, I pronounce it Awas, and I'll define him in a second, but on page 25 it says this book was transcribed. It was, Crowley sat down and wrote it, but it was given to him by a being he calls Awas. Awas will identify himself in another page. Page 25. Page 25. Here's another comment about the do all that you want. Also, take your fill and will of love as ye will, when, where, and with whom ye will. but always unto me. So in other words, if you see that little blonde, forgive, this is not very polite, and certainly not advocating this, but this is what Crowley's saying. If you like that blonde and want to be intimate with her, grab her. She's yours. Take your fill, and will of love as you will. All events are lawful. Now, the fact that the little blonde doesn't want to do this is of no consequence. It doesn't matter. You have the right to do this because you were given this right by the author of this booklet. Let me tell you who wrote it. Page 31. I'm sorry, here it is. I am the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory. The snake? The Bible talks about a snake in the Garden of Eden. What did he offer Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden? All events are lawful. Eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good or evil. So Satan originated the idea. All you got to do is decide for yourself, and you've got the right to do it. And I am the snake. Be strong, O man, lust. Enjoy all things of sense and rapture. It's going to be, I'm lusting after that little blonde. And Satan's giving me permission to do that. On page 40, it says, I am the secret serpent. Yes, the serpent told, according to Crowley, how to write the book, to authorize complete liberty. Now, I want to scare you, but just as I told you at the very beginning, remember this. I asked you to be on a jury, and please listen to this. You're going to find that I'm speaking the truth. Go back to the days of our founding. Our Declaration of Independence says an unalienable right is to liberty. The Sons of Liberty. Thomas Jefferson said liberty. Patrick Henry said, give me life, give me liberty or death. And that means I want total unrestricted freedom to act accordingly. They knew what it meant. Later on in the 1800s, we got the Statue of Liberty, not the Statue of Freedom. It means to act morally. So I'm trying to get you to understand there's something going on here. And we're going to now finish with this. Then maybe we can take some calls. We got a few more minutes anyway. Let's continue to show you that our founding fathers tried to give us liberty in the 13th Amendment. Now let's go back to the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. Everybody knows in the history books the war was fought over the issue of slavery. Little Ralphie Epperson dug into the Civil War, and I wrote a book about it. Well, it's in part in The Unseen Hand. And by the way, just as a matter of interest, Shane, may I urge your listeners to do themselves a little favor and go to eBay and type in 3 words, The Unseen Hand. One word, Unseen Hand, H-A-N-D. The Unseen Hand by Epperson. And then click on it and read the reviews. There's only 6 of them, but they're all, I couldn't write them better than someone else did. And I want you'll have to trust me. You don't have to, but trust me, I didn't write them. I didn't bribe anybody. I didn't even know they were there for years. Read them yourself. And then read this book, because I showed you in the book the Civil War was not, it was fought over slavery, but that was to get people to secede from the Union so brother could kill brother. One brother was favoring the North. He grabbed his musket and went out the field to shoot his brother who was in favor of slavery. But that was the reason. It's all covered in The Unseen Hand. Now we're going to read the 13th Amendment after the Civil War was ended, issued in 1865. The 10th Amendment, the first 10 were called the Bill of Rights. Then they added the 11th, 12th, and now the 13th. Let's read that. 13th Amendment passed 1865. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude. Now let's define the word slavery. Slavery is forcing somebody into a contract without your permission. When we brought the slaves over, by the way, it wasn't me. I had nothing to do with slavery, but we all know our ancestors did. They brought slaves over and forced them into a contract, and then put them up for sale, and then people would bid on them, and you could buy a human being to be your slave. Now, if that human being ran away and tried to escape the conditions you forced him into, if you could tell the sheriff to look for him, and if he found him, he'd bring him back because he was property. That's what happens when you believe in slavery. Involuntary servitude, to me, is a synonym for it, but there must be a distinction because they said both. But in essence, government does not have the right to force you into a contract under the 13th Amendment. That's why they cannot force citizens of the state of Arizona to pay an income tax. Because under the 13th Amendment, they don't have the right. You live in the state, one of the states of America, and they live in the United States. They can force the citizens in the United States to pay tax, but not you, as I just read. Who must pay the tax? Citizens of the United States. And the reason they can't is because you've got freedom. Freedom from government to force you into a contract not of your choosing. That's why the letter said Social Security is voluntary. But notice this. This does not exclude voluntary servitude. Freedom would include the right, if I want to become a slave and let my master pay all my bills and I work for him and he tells me when to work and whether I get married or not married, what to do with my children and how often to work and how many hours, whatever, and pay me according or not pay me, that's voluntary. You can do that. If you want to do that, voluntary servitude is permitted. And that's important because of the 14th Amendment. So we're not finished. Listen to this. We're going to now read from the 14th Amendment. Passed in 1868, I think it was. 1868, I got it. Oh, anyway, I think it was a couple of 3 years, 67 or 68. All persons, wait a minute, slow down, Ralph, wait a minute. What's a person? We talked about being the people. We, the people, have unalienable rights. And now suddenly we're called persons. All persons. What's a person? A person is one who lives by privilege. Privilege. You have to get permission to do whatever you want if you're a person. The Roe v. Wade decision in 1973 declared that the fetus, now we've been calling the unborn child a baby up until the Roe v. Wade decision, and as a baby it was a member of the people and had unalienable rights from the moment of conception. So they changed that. They said, no, we're not going to call it a baby anymore. We'll call it a fetus, and then we'll declare in the decision of the Supreme Court that a baby is not protected by the 14th Amendment. It's not a person. It therefore doesn't even have privileges. You have the right to terminate that, just like the right you've got to cut your fingernail and discard it. You can terminate this fetus. Do you understand how significant this change is? We are now persons. No, I'm still a citizen of Arizona. I live in Arizona, the state wherein I reside. But let's finish, because this is going to make me a person. All persons born or naturalized in the United States. Now stop right there. So now they're saying there's two ways to live in the United States. You can either be born there or naturalized in there. Now, people born in Washington, D.C., as we're going to see, are citizens of that government, the United States. But you can be naturalized into that thing, which is a voluntary act. Now, let me give you an example, probably the best one I can think of, and that's Arnold Schwarzenegger, the governor. He ran for governor a couple of terms. They call it, that's okay. That was supposed to be funny, and all your people are laughing, but someone called him the governor. But he was the governor of California. Schwarzenegger was born in Austria. Therefore, he decided to get out of Austria and leave and come to America. Well, he come to the United States. So he decided to do that, and he applied to become a citizen of the United States through naturalization, which means he had to meet certain qualifications and be on the list and be approved, and they won't let him in if he's a criminal or a crook or carrying a disease. So whatever, all those terms are met by Schwarzenegger. So he was given permission to come to the United States. I think it takes 5 years. It might be 3 or 1. I don't know. Maybe it's changed. But you have to wait a while. And then suddenly they give you a bunch of classes on the government and the flag and the Congress, etc. And then you stand up and with the flag in your left hand, put your right hand over your heart and pledge allegiance to the government of the United States, the most powerful, tyrannical government ever devised by man, because it's all lawful. Everything Congress is doing is lawful. It's legal because the power to legislate in all cases whatsoever is granted to Congress. So Congress decides what the terms of naturalization are, and they can only make you a citizen if you volunteer. So if you don't want to become a citizen to get the benefit called Social Security, you're free to do that. You don't have to. That's what it means, being voluntary. I don't want your stinking retirement benefits. I'll take care of it myself. So they had to trick us into naturalization by getting us to walk into the office and say, I want to sign up for that benefit. Now, they don't tell you they can only give that benefit to citizens of the United States. Well, how did I become a citizen of the United States? By asking for them to give me a benefit. Probably on the form it asked me, are you a citizen of the United States? Of course, I guess so. I live here. I live in Arizona, but I guess I'm in the United States. I don't live in Germany or France. So I probably said, yes, I'm a citizen of the United States. So the only way I could do that is either be born there, and I wasn't. I've got a piece of paper that says I was born in Arizona. So you can be naturalized. So the act of voluntarily asking the government of the United States to give you this benefit must mean you are volunteering to become naturalized, just like Schwarzenegger, and become a citizen of the United States, the most oppressive government ever devised by man. And therefore, they can force you into contracts not of your choosing. You don't want this Obamacare. You are forced to get it. If you don't get it, you go to jail or pay fines. If you don't pay your income taxes because you're a citizen but you object, you go to jail. You go into prison. All sorts of nearly everything we're doing is something else. And now there's a secondary reason that we're allowed to work on these benefits. And this is not very pleasant. So hold on, America. I hope you're sitting down, because this last step is not very pleasant. Let's get into the last step. I'm flipping through pages. Here it is. Okay, now let's talk about this. We're going to make some statements of fact and then draw some conclusions. Statement of fact. 17 appeals have been made to the United States Supreme Court, some of which were made even when Obama was running for the presidency of the United States, way before, 2008. So sometime during 2008, the first appeal, there are total, the last I heard, there were 17 appeals to the Supreme Court to determine whether or not Obama is, quote, natural born, unquote. To be president, according to the Constitution, you have to be natural born, unquote. Now, I'm going to read you a quotation that you can watch with your own eyes on the internet. Michelle Obama was giving a speech, and it looks like she's behind a platform in front of a curtain, like maybe in a high school or something. And she says, quote, I wrote it down, I played it over and over until I got exactly the right words in whatever she said. Quote, when we, now of course she's talking about me and Obama, Barack, when we took our trip to Africa and visited his home country in Kenya, what? Wait a minute. Home country? What does that mean? What's a home country? Schwarzenegger's home country is not the United States. It's Austria. The illegals who are here now, their home country is Mexico or Guatemala or Costa Rica. The people in Canada, their home country is Canada. Even if they come to the United States, their home country is Canada. She just admitted that Barack Obama was born in Kenya. Wait a minute. Barack Obama's grandmother says, there's videos of her saying it, he was born in Kenya. His father's half-brothers, two of them, were there when Barack Obama's mother was there. They said he was born in Kenya. So Michelle and the grandmother and half-brothers of his father all said he was born in Kenya. And the Supreme Court's purpose is to determine whether he is qualified to be but they've done nothing. Why? Why? Secondly, Barack Obama is writing law, changing law, amending law, exempting law, delaying law by executive orders, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Now, according to the Constitution, he has no authority to do that. Well, the checks and balances then should say, wait a minute, Barack Obama, we're going to impeach you, which is what you do when Barack Obama, who took an oath to protect and support and defend the Constitution, if he's not doing that, he can be removed through a process called impeachment. And he's done it. Therefore, why is the Congress not doing anything about it? Why is the Supreme Court, first of all, not declaring that he's not natural born? Why are they not also impeaching him? They've got the power to do it. No, they don't. No, they don't. Oh, wait a minute, Ralph. Please don't tell me, Ralph. I don't want to know. I'm going to answer it, and please, I implore you once again, please hear me out. I'm going to spend probably 5 minutes on this, plus or minus, but it's going to take a few minutes. So please just listen to a couple of stories. The Constitution is null and void. The Constitution of the United States as a document no longer exists. It's been declared null and void by the Supreme Court, and I'll identify it specifically in a few minutes. It has been replaced with the thing called the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC. Read it. You can get it on the internet. Open it up and read it yourself. It's the law of contract. Joining the Social Security Administration is a contract. When you pay Social Security tax or taxes, it's a contract. When you get a license, it's a contract. Now, I'm going to tell you two quick little examples of a man who I believe you'll have to. This is a secondhand story. There was one man's telling me of his own personal experience. This didn't happen to me, but I want you to know I knew Howard Freeman, who's a man who is telling these two stories. And he's a very humble little man. If he walks in a crowd, you probably wouldn't even see him because he wasn't very tall, and he didn't make a whimper. Just kind of plodded through life. But he was a great man, very humble and friendly, and loved life. He's now gone, but he came to Tucson probably 5 or 6 years ago. And when he did, the man who brought him was a friend of mine. Said, "Listen, Howard's going to be here. He says we can sit down and talk to him Friday night. He's going to speak tomorrow morning, Saturday. But come on over, Ralph." I said, "Okay." So Freeman was there. I went up to him and introduced. I knew Howard. I met him 3 or 4 times out on the circuit. Sometimes we'd both speak at the same seminar. So I knew him, but only casually. So "Hi, Ralph. How are you?" I said, "Freeman, first of all, I'm going to ask you this. We all want you to adopt us, so we can all we can all be. I can be Ralphie Freeman." He said, "I can't do that, Ralph, but I can urge you, go out and become a free man." So I tried that. That didn't work either. Okay, he's going to tell us 2 stories. Number 1, Howard Freeman was, a young friend of his. He didn't identify him by age or anything, just a friend of his, decided to stop paying income taxes because he learned they were voluntary. So he invited Howard Freeman to be his expert witness. So he was charged with failure to file. His defense was he pled not guilty, and he's going to appeal to the judge to show him that there's no authority, they cannot force him. There's no legal requirement to pay taxes. So he invited the prosecution brought the IRS agent with the records. I'll make this up. Yes, this young man, Bill Smith, paid his taxes from 1994 to 2006 and then stopped. And this is now 2008, and so we would now filed charges against him. He's pled not innocent. Do you have the records? Oh, yes, they're right here. Here's copies. They're all entered into the record of the court hearings. So now the young man's the prosecution sits down. The young man says, "I want to." First witness is Howard Freeman. Freeman sits down. "Freeman, who are you?" "Well, I'm so and so." "Well, what do you do?" "I'm whatever it was." He's retired. I was whatever I did. I was one of those, and He said, "What do you know about the Constitution?" "Well, I've studied it for 40-some years, and I believe I know a great deal about it." "Well, okay, I'm going to ask you, are we required to pay income taxes?" And Howard Freeman cited 6 or 7 Supreme Court decisions that said no one who lives in the America has to pay income taxes. He cited them by name and where they were, what year they were determined by the Supreme Court. So after he got that into the court record, he got in what he wanted to say. So the young man said, "Thank you, Mr. Freeman. You can sit down." So Freeman sat down with him at the table and said, "You're going to win." That man is a federal judge. And as a federal judge, he's obligated by oath to support, defend, and protect the Constitution and Supreme Court decisions. So that means he's got to abide by those 7 cases. I'll use 7 cases that I just cited by name and where they are and what page, etc. So he says, "You're going to win." So now the judge speaks to the jury. Okay, the case is now, the defendant had his case, the prosecution, so you are now going to be dismissed to go reach a verdict. But before you go, I want you to listen to what I'm going to say. You are not to listen to or give any credibility to the testimony of Howard Freeman, period. Freeman, who, in my humble opinion, could never get mad. This is about as mad as I think he got. He can't do that. Knowing Freeman, he was a humble little guy. He didn't have a temper that I ever saw. So he probably said that. But anyway, I do know this. The jury left. He ran around back and got the judge just as he was going into the office across the hall. So he kind of said, "Your Honor," "Yes, Mr. Freeman." "Yeah, Your Honor, you're a federal judge." "Yes, I am indeed, sir." He said, "Your Honor, you took an oath to support the Constitution." "That's correct, I did, sir." He said, "But Your Honor, those cases I cited, what authority, forgive me, those cases that I cited were all standing Supreme Court decisions. Where did you get the authority to negate those? You took an oath to protect the Constitution and standing Supreme Court decisions." And listen to what the judge said, according to Freeman. He said, "Those decisions were all prior to 1938. 1938. Franklin Roosevelt was president after the great crash of 29. So something happened in 1938. So Freeman says, "Wait a minute, what happened in 1938? According to Howard, the judge said, "I've told you too much." And he walked into his office, shut the door, and locked it from the inside, which means conversation over, Mr. Freeman. Don't come back. So Freeman said, "I got to check." Now, Freeman was a constitutional expert. He knew how to find Supreme Court decisions. So he walked into the law library and got the 1938 case books. By the way, let's talk about that just as an aside. When a lawyer, most lawyers, when they have a TV ad urging you to do business with them, if you need a lawyer, they're standing in front of a wall of books. They don't tell you what those books are, except they're saying to you, "Listen, those books contain the law. And I know the law because they call me a lawyer. So you need me to know what those things are because you don't know one thing in there. So you employ me and I will defend you with all of these law books." And that's what Freeman used. One of those law books was the 1938 record of the Supreme Court decisions for that year. And he kept flipping and found the Erie Railroad versus Tompkins case of 1938. Erie Railroad, ERIE, Railroad versus Tompkins, TOMPKINS. Look it up yourself. You can go and read, and it'll say, "There is no general common law in the United States." Wait a minute. The Constitution was the common law, but there is none anymore. Now, Freeman said, "Wait a minute. Okay, well, now let me finish the story, and we'll come back to what is the common law." Okay, now, a little while later, Freeman said, during the same conversation, but a little while later after this case, and I don't remember how long it was. It was years ago that I met Freeman, saw him anyway. So I don't remember. It could have been 10 years ago. But anyway, a short time later, he got a phone call from a retired state Supreme Court justice. Every state has a Supreme Court to determine whether the laws passed by their government are constitutional. So he was one of those for the state of Wyoming, where Mr. Freeman lived. So he said, "I want you to come over. I've got something that you need to know." So Freeman went over there, and I can presume Freeman was shaking shaking in his boots. He's going to be on a personal interview with someone who's going to tell him something that only he knows that Freeman didn't know. So Freeman walked in probably shaking, and the judge said, after they got through the amenities, he said, "Mr. Freeman, I've been watching you for years, and I want to commend you for your knowledge." This is Freeman saying this, and of course, that sounds pretty cocky, but he's reporting back what the judge said. The judge said, "I've been watching you. I commend you. Your knowledge of the Constitution is admirable, and you're 100% correct, except you need to know what I know." "What do you know, Judge?" Well, he says, "In 1938, I was a federal judge," which means he was appointed by Roosevelt or someone else, other president, and was a federal judge. So in 1938, he was now retired, which means he quit the job as a federal judge and became a state Supreme Court justice, and then apparently retired there and was now living in Wyoming, retired. But he said in 38, he said, "All of us federal judges were called together by President Franklin Roosevelt." Now, he didn't say how this happened, but I can gather there might only be 500 or 1,000, and maybe get them all together one weekend in Washington, D.C., no doubt. And Roosevelt came out and said, "Okay, I'm going to make it very brief." He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you might remember that in 1933, I determined that we were no longer going to redeem the gold certificates in gold to end the crash of 1929. 1933, he did that. Now, what's a gold certificate? Gold was money up until the 1933 thing. And what you would do would be take your gold in little nuggets in a sack or something, take it to an assayer. He would determine how much of it was gold and whatever else it was, and then you would pay you for it, and then he'd sell it to a bank, and the bank would take it and melt it down and make a coin out of it, and then put it back in the back room. And you then, when you did that, the bank would give you a gold certificate. This is to certify that the bearer, meaning the guy carrying this piece of paper, has on deposit $10 in gold, payable to the bearer on demand. There's no comma, except when the president says you can't do it anymore. It's payable on demand. That was a guarantee, a contract between us and the federal government. We're going to hold your gold, but when you want it on demand, you're going to get it. But not, Roosevelt said, "I want you to turn in the gold to solve this crisis," and something like 90 to 95% of the gold was turned in, and we got Federal Reserve notes. Federal Reserve notes aren't backed by gold. The gold certificate was. Now, Roosevelt, now that I explained, he said, "I suspended that. We're no longer doing that." And he said, "The international bankers who own our national debt have declared our suspension of the gold certificate the act of a bankrupt nation. And as creditor to this government, we are now going to demand that you eliminate the Constitution of the United States." Roosevelt said, "Shorty, there are going to be read of a new law for the United States called the Uniform Commercial Code. There's only one obligation to you as judges, is that you are to take," and these three words, I believe, are a legal words that you can look up in a law dictionary, because they have a separate dictionary. But he said you are to take silent judicial notice of that fact. Silent judicial notice, which means in Ralph Epperson's terms, you can't tell the dummies. Don't tell the American people we're going to sell them some bread and other grain and a fire engine, and that's going to be. And you can't tell them they're getting gunpowder and a huge cannon. Do you understand? This judge was revealing. So then he said, "There's one more condition, Mr. Freeman," which I presume he said probably at the beginning. "I'm going to ask you not to ever reveal my name." Why? Now this is me speaking. Why? Why could he get into trouble? He said, "If you do, I could get into a lot of trouble." So which means, wait a minute, how could a federal judge get in trouble for talking about law? How could he do that? Because he was sworn to take silent judicial notice of that fact, which means They're always going to lie to us and make us believe it's the Constitution, but it's not. It's the Uniform Commercial Code. Now, I got one more story to tell you in keeping with this. This will be the last one. I have a friend of mine who's now gone, but I've known him for 30-some years until he passed away probably 5 years ago. He called me maybe 10 years ago and said, Ralph, I got a story for you that you'll enjoy. I said, please do. So he said, let me tell you, I was driving in Eloy, Arizona. As I say, I live in Tucson. Eloy is a small town north of us, maybe 100 miles. That doesn't matter. But anyway, Eloy is not a very big city. It's a farming community, but it's probably got one traffic light, a bank, a church, and a department store, and probably a McDonald's and 17 fast food restaurants. But there's probably one policeman. So my friend was driving through the town. He made an illegal right-hand turn, and sure enough, looked at his rearview mirror, and there's the policeman with the lights going. So my friend was familiar with Freeman, and Freeman taught him, and I'm teaching you as well. If you've never heard this, pay attention. If you get stopped by a policeman, do not stop on public property. Go to private property. Pull into a shopping center, or get off of the road if you're on a highway, get off the road, get down in the side, or take an off ramp, get on a city road or something. Why? Because if you get arrested, they'll take you and leave your car and tow it away, and it's very expensive to get it out of towing. If you park it on private property, they cannot tow your car. Please, if nothing else you learned from what I talked about today, keep that in mind. Now, so this young man, I'm sure he did that, went to a private property, and the policeman stopped him and said, you just violated, I'm going to make it up, Arizona Revised Statute 2714. I'm making an illegal right-hand turn. I'm going to write you a ticket right here. You have a couple of options. You can plead guilty, pay the fine, put it in the envelope that I'm giving you because you live in Tucson, and you can take that, drop it in a mailbox in Eloy, and drive to Tucson, and the thing's over. You paid the fine, pled guilty, it's over. Second thing, you could take the envelope with you to Tucson and pay your fine and send it back, and then it's wiped clean. Or the third thing, you can talk to the judge. So my friend says, I want to talk to the judge. So the two of them drove, and I presume they drove in separate cars. It's not important. But they went to the judge, and they're both there. The policeman's got to be there because he's the state expert on traffic. He knows the law, and he knows how you violate, and he's a witness because he's got good eyes, and he's the policeman. So the judge says, in the matter of the city of Eloy versus Maury Jones, are you in the courtroom, Mr. Jones? And Maury said, yes, sir, I'm right here. So how do you plead in the violation of 2814? He said, well, sir, now here's what he was taught by Howard Freeman. Number one, you're always very humble, very contrite, very supportive. Don't get angry. You just say, Your Honor, may I ask, I need to know what type of court I'm in. And the judge says, well, Mr. Jones, you're in a traffic court in the city of Eloy. Probably, he said, chartered by the state of Arizona in 1927, and they were a legal corporation, etc. So he said, okay, now, may I ask you another question? Now, Freeman says you keep asking questions, and he's got to allow you to ask questions. So he'll say yes. So now he's going to ask the second question. What type of court is this traffic court? Now, the young, I think I said he's the traffic court in the city of whatever it is. Okay. Now, the third question is, third question is, I'm going to give it to you in its entirety and then break it down. Maury was going to say, is this a common law court, a court of equity, or a court of admiralty law? Those are the only three types of court worldwide. So the first one was a common law court. So now we go back to what actually happened. Maury started by saying, is this a common law court? And now, before he could get the next word out, according to Maury, and I have once again confidence in what he's telling me, he said the judge banged the gavel down in anger. Bang! Excuse me if I broke your eardrums. But listen to this. He shouted, case dismissed. Don't you ever come back to my courtroom, Mr. Jones. Now, wait a minute. So Maury walked out free. No fine, no ticket on his record, nothing. What? Huh? He made the illegal right-hand turn. How's he going to defeat that? Well, it wasn't me driving. He was the only one in the car. Well, I didn't do it. I really was going straight. No, I saw you. I'm a policeman. I'm certified. So how do you beat it? You don't. But he beat it. Now, notice this. This is one of the lowest courts in the United States, the traffic court, down at the very bottom. And this judge was taking silent judicial notice of the fact that the Constitution, the common law, is null and void. But I have to take silent judicial notice of that, and I don't want the other people in the audience who are going to come next to figure out what you did or to spend time with you, because if they do that, they're going to beat the system as well, and I can't allow that. So I'm going to intimidate them by screaming at you. And they're going to say, my gosh, if I don't say it the right way, I go to jail. So they'll say, okay, I'll pay my ticket. Do you understand? Howard Freeman was correct, and the judge was correct. Judges all over this country are taking silent judicial notice of the fact that the Constitution is null and void. That's why the Supreme Court will not hear whether Barack Obama is a natural-born citizen. That's why Barack Obama is not being impeached for violating the Constitution, amending law, changing law, doing everything that he can to take over the authority and the powers of the Congress. And all of these people know the Constitution is null and void. Erie Railroad versus Tompkins case. Read it yourself. It's in the law library. If you don't know what that means, go to a university or a college someplace and go to the law library and ask for the 38 Supreme Court decisions. And in my DVD, you'll see the actual details on where you can find it. Well, I think that's enough. I think I covered it. By the way, I just did it pretty close to 2 hours in time. I want to end this with this. I would urge all of you listening, if you're still there, to tune in or watch a DVD that I produced called America's Secret Destiny. America's Secret Destiny. Make sure it's the one done by Epperson. There are others by the same name, I believe. Watch it. It's 4 hours, Ralph. I can't watch it. Yes, you can. All you got to do is sit down. It's broken out into 4 one-hour segments. Watch it an hour at a time. But I would urge you to watch it all together. And you're going to be shocked at what you're going to learn. This country is being taken someplace, and I know where it is. And my second book tells you where it's being taken, the New World Order. You might want to consider, last comment, my website is Ralph-Epperson, if you don't mind, Shane, Ralph-Epperson.com. R-A-L-P-H-Epperson, E as in Edward, P as in Peter, E-R-S-O-N.com. Once you go there, you'll see all of my books and DVDs I've got for sale. Please take a look the way you want. If you want to reach me and talk to me, learn from me, challenge me, call me. I've got a phone number. I answer the phone. So please keep in touch. And Shane, lastly, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners. I'm sorry it took so long, but as I said, there's some things in there that I think your listeners need to hear. You still there? I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think Shane just fell out of his chair. Shane, are you still there? What? I started to speak when I'm taking a little sip of a soft drink here.
Indeed, Ralph, and I definitely thank you for coming on. It was a great broadcast. And like I told people before, I wasn't gonna talk much. One, because I was having technical difficulties, and second, I wanted to give Mr. Ralph the entire floor. So I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. The next broadcast will probably be middle to end of January. I'm not exactly sure yet. Definitely stay tuned, and I will take us out with some Bill Cooper.
Understand this too. I'm not trying to tell you what the truth is, because sometimes the truth is extremely difficult to find. And sometimes we believe we're broadcasting the truth and it turns out we really aren't. But if we find out we aren't, we must be willing and instantly able to go on the air and say we were wrong and correct it. That's a responsibility that we all have to carry. It's embarrassing. I've had to do it several times because I'm a human being. I make mistakes too. The only difference being when I make a mistake, it's usually not forgivable. It's what happens when you become a public figure. Your wife can make a mistake, but Rush Limbaugh never! Right?
want you all to get interested in this. All of you should be publishing a newsletter or a newspaper. All of you should be documenting what you publish. All of you should have a satellite receiving station and be rebroadcasting programming to your neighborhood. All you got to do is make sure that you're broadcasting on a frequency that's not interfering with any other broadcast. Which means you don't just check it at your house. You get in your car and you drive out 25 miles and all around, and you make sure that there's nobody else on that frequency before you use it, so you know you're safe. In my little town of Eager, which is a very small town, between Springerville and Eager is 2 miles. Another 2 miles either way, and you've covered everybody in the valley. And I'm up on a big mountain in the middle of this valley where the town surrounds the mountain, and I'm broadcasting 6 miles in every direction in my town. And it's militia country. Arizona is dangerous for socialists. And when the war starts, heaven help whoever they send to fight in Arizona.